Hey guys! Tonight we journey into the dim stairwells and creaking rafters of ancient Rome, not to admire marble or orators, but to meet someone who rarely gets a statue, the apartment superintendent. You step barefoot onto uneven stone. It's night. The lamp oil's low. The neighbor above you just dumped their chamber pot straight into the alley. And someone's screaming about a missing sandal. You live in an insula, one of Rome's bustling, precariously stacked apartment blocks, and tonight, you're not just a tenant. You're the one responsible for the chaos. And you probably won't survive this job with your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy Roman gossip travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You glance upward at the 5-story wooden skeleton creaking over your head. It's dark, but not quiet. A baby's crying 2 floors above you. A pot crashes in a distant kitchen. Somewhere, someone is arguing about whether turnips count as dinner. You are the insularius, an uncelebrated cog in Rome's ever-rotating wheel. The insulae, as these early apartment buildings were called, were a triumph of both necessity and neglect. Rome's population boomed during the imperial period. 1 million residents squashed inside a city never designed for them. The rich had villas with gardens. You had mildew and splinters, lots of splinters. You trudge through a hallway whose plaster peels like sunburnt skin. The walls are thin. You can hear your neighbor's dog sigh in its sleep. And you're already regretting agreeing to take care of this place when old Crispus passed away. He was the last super, and everyone said he was too grumpy to die. But here you are, holding his keys, his broom, and his enormous pile of unpaid complaints. Some nights, you wonder what your title even means. You're not a landlord. Those live in villas across the river. You're more like a sacrificial offering to domestic chaos. The tenants call you insularius, but behind closed doors they say things that would make even Mercury blush. Still, this was considered upward mobility. Literally, these buildings stretched 5, 6, sometimes 7 stories high. The higher the floor, the cheaper the rent, and the more likely it was to collapse on you during dinner. Historians still argue whether most insulae had internal plumbing, or if that was reserved for the luckier blocks closer to aqueducts. You've learned not to stand near the back wall when it rains. Trust issues, mostly. Tonight, as you make your nightly rounds, you pass by a family cooking lentils over a smoky brazier. The fire hazard is obvious. The smell is oddly comforting. The child offers you a handful, eyes wide. You nod, but decline. Your stomach's already dealing with the fig you found on the stairwell this morning. It tasted like hope and tetanus. Each floor has its own ecosystem. The ground-level shops stay open late, their owners gossiping like birds. The second floor is mostly retired legionaries who pretend not to hear things falling apart. The third, that's for actors and poets, Rome's noisiest tenants. And up top, near the stars and leaks, live the poor, the ambitious, and the unlucky, including you. You pause at the roof. There's a breeze tonight, not cool, but moving. The city glows faintly with the fires of countless kitchens and the torches of drunk senators. Someone plays a flute nearby. Badly, you lean against a cracked column and let the night swallow you. Below, the forum is winding down. Vendors pack up. Cats wander alleys in search of discarded sardines. Rome hums like a beast in sleep. You remember something Crispus once said? The city doesn't love us, but it notices when we stop sweeping. You didn't understand it then. You do now. Fun fact, some historians believe the insula inspired later European tenement housing, though with slightly less chance of spontaneous combustion. Others claim they were just accidents stacked on top of public negligence. There's still debate over whether superintendents like you were paid in coin, food, or just fear. Some records suggest wine was offered as a bonus. You've never seen it. You walk back down the stairs, stepping over a loose plank that nearly claimed your ankle last week. Someone's left a basket of fermented fish at your door. Thank you gift. Or death threat. Unclear. You finally reach your tiny room behind the stairwell. It's more cupboard than bedroom. The ceiling dips like a drunk centurion, but it's yours. You collapse onto your straw mattress, which smells like wet goat. One of the better nights. Actually, you listen as the building groans in its sleep. A wooden giant full of whispers, secrets, and one unlucky superintendent. Tomorrow, you'll fix a broken shutter, mediate a dispute over stolen olives, and try not to get arrested when the inspector shows up unannounced. Again, but for now, you're safe. For now, the building holds. You wake to the sound of groaning wood and a pigeon trapped inside someone's clay chimney. Again, the sun hasn't fully risen, but already the insula is murmuring with life feet padding across floorboards. Shutters creaking open. A mother somewhere shouting at her teenage son to stop pretending he's a gladiator and finish his barley mash. You rub your eyes, still sore from yesterday's lime dust. Someone was experimenting with self-renovation upstairs. They now have a hole in their floor and a new skylight. You'll deal with it later. But first, a little walk through history. Because these buildings, these early high-rises of ancient Rome, didn't just appear overnight like mushroom spores on wet bread. They evolved, like a panic response. As Rome's empire expanded, so did its population. Suddenly, there were more people than space. Villas gave way to dense blocks. The city's flatlands were devoured. So Rome grew upwards, and not always wisely. By the time of Emperor Augustus, some estimates say Rome had more than 40,000 insula apartment blocks crammed into tight districts, like puzzle pieces that no longer fit. It was real estate roulette. If you live near the city center, you were either rich, bribed someone, or both. If you didn't, well, you better love stairs. Historians still argue whether early insulae were regulated or just glorified wooden tinderboxes. One imperial edict limited building height to about 70 Roman feet, roughly 20 meters. But enforcement, let's say, optimistic. You walk through the lower alley now, where the stone shops beneath your building are starting to open. A baker is already sweating over his oven. He nods at you with the defeated respect of one overworked soul to another. "Watch for rats," he mutters. Always a good morning tip. What made Insula unique wasn't just their height, it was their hybrid identity. Ground floors were often shops or tabernae. Above, families nested in single-room apartments, some even rented by the hour. Others split rooms with strangers, livestock, or the occasional failed playwright. And here's the kicker. These weren't the slums. Not exclusively. Rome's middle class lived here too. It was a bizarre blend of classes. The tenant above you might be a senator's disgraced nephew. The one below, a woman running an illegal sausage operation. And you, the glue, the human sponge for their complaints and chamber pot threats. Quirky tidbit. Some apartment buildings had wooden cranes or pulleys for hoisting up water or goods, not out of convenience, but because carrying amphorae up 6 flights was considered grounds for divorce. As you continue your rounds, you pass a fresco peeling from a stairwell wall. It's faded a woman pouring wine into a cup held by a very muscular goat. You have no explanation, neither does anyone else. But the tenants swear it protects the building from mice. There's something oddly modern about this vertical living. If you squint, it could be a 1980s walk-up in Queens. Tenants complaining about leaks, kids throwing figs off balconies, whispered drama about whose lover left with whose sandal. Human nature doesn't evolve as fast as floor plans. You pause to peer into an atrium behind a gate. A little bit of greenery. The landlady planted rosemary here once before she vanished with the rent rolls. Some say she joined a traveling mime troupe. Others suspect she's still in the basement, hiding behind the olive jars. The insula itself is always changing. You're not just a superintendent, you're a crisis manager, a part-time priest, a walking fire hazard assessment. You fix holes, calm tempers, chase squirrels out of granaries, and sometimes, just sometimes, you sit on a crate at dawn and wonder how Rome got like this. There's an ache in the city, not the kind that bleeds, the kind that groans from age and effort. The stones are tired. The walls remember things you'd rather not. You pause beside a neighbor who's pouring gray water into the gutter. Might rain. She shrugs. The gods are annoyed. She might not be wrong. Rome's water system is a miracle held together by limestone. prayers, and a few very confused engineers. Some insulae are lucky enough to have piped water from nearby aqueducts, but many like yours rely on public fountains and roof cisterns, or bribes, or superstition. Fringe historians debate whether insulae had designated water carriers or if it was all tenant-organized chaos. One clay tablet suggests a man named Lucius invented a water rotation schedule for his building, only to be fined for blocking an aqueduct with chicken feathers. Bureaucracy, even then, was undefeated. You return to your room to grab the broom, the same one Crispus used for 30 years. It's more ceremonial than functional now, but somehow it still holds authority. Tenants move aside when you raise it. Children stop arguing. Pigeons mostly ignore you. Back on the 3rd floor, a boy holds out a wax tablet. My father wants to report the ceiling again. He says, it drips into his stew. You nod. You'll write it down. Again, the ceiling leaks every time it rains, but only into his stew, which has led to a surprisingly philosophical question. Does rain count as a condiment? You end your loop at the top floor, where the stairs narrow and the wood softens under your feet. The air smells like mold and hope. There's a skylight, technically a hole, but it lets in the morning, and the birds, and last week, a goat. Long story. From here, you can see the rooftops of Rome, red clay tiles, smoke rising, laundry flapping like flags of surrender. And in that moment, surrounded by cracked bricks and drifting feathers, you realize something simple. You live in a place that should not exist, a miracle of poor planning, a triumph of adaptation, a wooden prayer stacked 6 stories high, and somehow it hasn't collapsed. Not yet. You're halfway down the 2nd flight of stairs when you hear the unmistakable thunk of a clay jar hitting the floor, followed by an eruption of curses. Someone's dropped their olive oil again. That's the 3rd time this week. You pause, breathe, and tell yourself you're not going to scream. Not before breakfast. It's only been a few weeks since you officially became the insularius. You didn't really apply. You were the last one still living on site who hadn't been fined for public urination or storing goats indoors. That qualified you. Back when Crispus was alive, he ruled the building like a particularly grumpy Saturn watchful, sarcastic, eternally chewing something suspicious. You watched him handle everything from leaky ceilings to fistfights over fig rations. Then one day, he walked out onto the roof to yell at the gods and didn't come back. You found his sandals neatly left by the ladder. His final act of petty mystery. The land agent came by the next day, looked around, and muttered, "You'll do." Just like that, you had keys, a duty tablet, and more problems than Jupiter's love life. Historians still argue whether superintendents like you were considered full employees or more like indentured, semi-voluntary hostages. Some records suggest they were liberty-freed slaves given the role as a kind of halfway step to full independence. Others believe it was just a job nobody else wanted, especially after the flaming chamber pot incident of 87 CE. And yet, here you are, this morning. Your first task is knocking on the door of Unit 2B. The widow Demetia has once again barricaded herself inside with her collection of haunted dolls. She insists they whisper insults at night. You believe her. One of them once called you pigeon-brained. In Greek, you knock 3 times. No answer. 4 knocks. A scuffling. Then, if it's about the drain again, tell it. I'm not afraid of rust. You mark it down for later. Being a Roman superintendent means developing an instinct for emotional triage. Is the ceiling leak actively dangerous? No. Is someone threatening to poison the well? Not today. Is there a loose chicken in the stairwell again? Yes, but it's the good chicken. So you leave it alone. You carry a bundle of wooden pegs in your robe's sash. They're multi-purpose door stops, emergency repairs, tenant bribes for silence. You also have a wax stylus for note-taking, a knife for cutting frayed ropes, and the universal symbol of authority, the broom. The broom isn't just for sweeping, it's for banging on doors, for threatening teenage loafers, for swinging at feral cats. Some days, you suspect it holds magical powers. Other days, it just sheds splinters in your tunic. Today's major repair job involves a broken lintel above the 3rd floor doorway. You climb up, wedge a cracked board with 2 pegs, and whisper a small prayer to Minerva for wisdom. or at least temporary balance. Below you, children shriek with glee as they launch pebbles off the landing. One hits a donkey in the alley. The donkey doesn't care. The driver yells something anatomically improbable. Quirky detail. Not all insulae had superintendents. Some were tenant-managed, which is Latin for complete chaos. Fires, collapses, and impromptu cookouts using stolen furniture were common. Your building, somehow, avoided that fate, mostly because everyone is terrified of you now. It helps that you've developed what you call the superintendent squint. It's a perfect blend of disappointment, exhaustion, and barely contained sarcasm. You aim it at a teenager trying to sneak a brazier onto the roof. He backs away like you're Medusa in a robe. Rent collection is next. Yes, the highlight of your week. You go door to door, knocking with your stylus. Some tenants pay on time. Others pretend to be dead. One man swears he paid you last week. You remind him he gave you a handful of dried lentils and called it liquid currency. You take it up with the building's owner, Marcus Septimius, a bloated senator who thinks infrastructure is something you get after eating bad oysters. He lives in a villa 2 districts away and only visits when he wants to show off his new sandals. At your last meeting, he told you to handle things quietly and offered you a slightly moldy cheese wheel as a bonus. You used it to patch a hole in the 4th floor landing. It's working so far. You pass by the communal latrine and wince. Someone's decorated the wall again with graffiti involving Neptune and a carrot. You sigh. You'll scrub it later. Probably. On your way back down, you spot the old poet from Unit 5C arguing with a pigeon. Not about the usual food stealing, no. Today they're debating meter-in-love poems. You quietly back away. Historians debate how much authority superintendents actually had. Some inscriptions suggest they could fine tenants for damages. Others imply they were more like glorified errand boys with keys. The truth probably lived somewhere between indignity and mild dictatorship. And you walk that line daily. You reach your room just as the afternoon sun tilts. Your tunic is dusty. Your stylus is dull. And someone's left a note on your door. My floor creaks like a haunted temple. Fix or we summon a priest. It's unsigned. Probably the exorcist from 4D again. You sit on the edge of your straw mattress, feet aching. You've been up since dawn. Climbed 134 stairs, argued with a ghost doll, and bartered for unpaid rent using plum wine and sarcasm. No statues will ever be carved in your honor. No poets will write odes to your services. But somewhere, deep in the groaning bones of this building, you suspect the structure knows you hold it together. Nail by nail, glare by glare. Tomorrow, you'll battle a leaky cistern. Tonight, you close your eyes. The broom rests by your side like a loyal dog. The city sighs. You don't get halfway through your lentil mash the next morning before chaos calls again. There's a noise sharp, rhythmic, maddening, a sort of slap-thump scrape, followed by shouting in multiple dialects and at least one chicken. You bolt up from your stool, balancing the bowl in one hand and your dignity in the other. The noise is coming from the stairwell. Again, by the time you reach the 2nd floor landing, the cause reveals itself. A pottery merchant is trying to drag a 3-legged donkey cart up the stairs. Why? For delivery efficiency, he explains. You stare at him. He gestures at the cart, now jammed sideways between 2 support beams, its wheels spinning uselessly. It's stuck, he adds, as if this clarifies anything. You close your eyes, count to 3. Contemplate becoming a hermit in Gaul. Noise complaints are part of the job. Rome is many things glorious, brutal, absurd, but quiet is not one of them, especially in the insulae, where every footstep echoes like thunder, and walls are basically decorative suggestions. Historians still argue whether any kind of insulation was used between floors in insulae. Some say packed straw. Others suggest thin wood or clay, barely thicker than a stretched tunic. One scholar even proposed goat hair mats, but that paper mysteriously disappeared after a university dinner party ended in scandal. So it remains a mystery. Back in your building, a child races down the corridor with a bundle of sticks and no pants. Someone upstairs is hammering something that sounds like it shouldn't be hammered, and the air smells distinctly like burnt onions and wet laundry. You step carefully around a puddle of oil, muttering threats to Jupiter under your breath. It's not just the noise. It's the constant damage, the drip in the corner room, now dripping onto someone's shrine, the splintered floorboard that swallowed a sandal yesterday, the door that no longer opens unless whispered to. You fix what you can, when you can, with rope, nails, or creative lying. Last week, when an entire floorboard gave way under a market porter's foot, you simply stretched a curtain over the hole and labeled it sacred ventilation. People stopped complaining. Some even left offerings. You knock at Unit 1D, home of a particularly sour-tempered fishmonger named Lucilla. She opens the door already mid-sentence. If it's about the smell, tell them salted mackerel has every right to breathe. You nod. Her walls leak brine. She claims it's good luck. You claim it's a health hazard. Nobody wins. As you jot her latest grievances on your wax tablet, she leans closer. Also, someone's been singing opera at midnight. Badly. You make another note, then another. As she insists it's the ghost of her late husband. You'd argue, but last time you heard it too, from 2 floors up. It's not uncommon for residents to blame things on ghosts. You don't mind. Ghosts don't clog drains. Speaking of which, drain duty calls. The building's main drainage pipe has been slow again. Likely a chunk of soap, a pine cone, or a child's toy. Possibly all 3. You roll up your sleeve and make the descent. Down in the bowels of the building, literally you enter the crawl space behind the latrine wall. The scent is educational. You prod the pipe gently with a reed pole. Something shifts, something growls. You choose to leave that part of the pipe alone for now. Quirky tidbit. Romans were surprisingly advanced with their sanitation public toilets, sewer systems, shared baths. But the plumbing inside insulae, not so much. Pipes cracked, drains clogged, and maintenance was left to whoever had the courage or debt to do it. Back upstairs, you pause to inspect a support beam near the stairwell. It's bowing slightly. A bad sign. You scratch at it with your stylus and sigh. The wood is soft, too soft. You add it to the list. Somewhere between replace 4th floor rope railing and find out who's fermenting eggs behind the laundry alcove. You pass by a window and spot a new graffiti carving on the outer wall. A crude image of a man being chased by a very angry chicken. Underneath it, someone scrawled, Superintendents inutilis, useless superintendent. You tilt your head. At least they spelled it right. Historians believe graffiti was more than vandalism. It was ancient social media, love notes, gossip, insults, prayers, even math problems. One wall in Pompeii famously had a complaint about how loud the upstairs tenant was during romantic activities. Some things never change. You grab a bit of charcoal and quietly add a reply under the chicken art. At least I'm not the one who fell in the cistern. Gaius. Petty. Yes, satisfying. Deeply. By midday, you've already resolved 6 disputes, patched 2 leaks, prevented 1 marital duel barely, and confiscated a musical latrine flute from a child who claims it summons Neptune. The city buzzes around you like a hive suite in theory, but mostly full of stings. The hardest part of the job isn't the noise, or the filth, or the perpetual threat of collapse. It's the constant awareness that it's all temporary. The walls, the people, the creaky beams you sleep beneath. Everything here is slowly giving way, and your job isn't to fix it. Not really. Your job is to delay the inevitable. 1 nail, 1 sweep, 1 shouted warning at a time. You head back toward your room. Just as the sun begins slouching toward the rooftops, pigeons cluster near the chimney again. Someone sings a lullaby nearby, off-key but honest. A door slams. A pot crashes. You don't even flinch. Another day down. The building still stands. Barely. You wake in the dark to the smell of smoke. Not fire, thankfully not fire, but the acrid ghost of someone's failed cooking experiment drifting through the building like a warning. You sit up, scratch your neck, and reach for your most sacred possession, the broom. It's not just a broom. It's your badge of office, your scepter. Your negotiation tool, your emergency get-out-of-fistfight stick. The bristles are worn. The handle has teeth marks. Long story, but it's yours. Today is maintenance day. Not that there's ever a day without maintenance. But this morning, you've actually carved out time to repair your tool set. You lay it out on a crude shelf beside your cot. Stylus, wax tablets, string, a bag of copper nails, a dented hammer, and a jar labeled "For bribes only." It contains 2 raisins and half a coin. Superintendents in Rome didn't get much, but they made do. Your toolkit is a miracle of desperation. Need a hinge, rope, and a bent spoon. Need a lock, tie a knot, and pretend it's sacred. You once fixed a cracked chamber pot using boiled flour paste and blind optimism. It held for 3 whole days. Historians still argue whether Rome's building caretakers were officially trained. There's no known manual, no surviving guide to how to survive being the insularius. Most of what you know, you learned by failing, ducking, or inheriting Crispus's half-legible scribble scrolls. He had diagrams for emergency latrine sealing and something labeled Rat Protocol Advanced. You've never opened that one. Too scared. You sling your tools into a canvas pouch and head up the stairwell, careful not to step on the broken tile near the 2nd floor landing. You left it there on purpose. It's your tenant speed trap. First stop, door hinge, 3rd floor. A family of 5 has taken to using a piece of driftwood as their front door. You admire their creativity, but the squeaking is haunting. You wedge the hinge with wax and pine sap, then bang it with your hammer until it sounds slightly less like a dying goose. "Bless you," says the grandmother inside. The door hasn't screamed in Latin since Tuesday. Next, roof tiles. You climb the final steps into the blazing light of the rooftop, Rome stretching wide below you. It's hot. The tiles are cracked. Some are missing entirely, likely thrown by a bored teenager or blown off during the last thunder tantrum from Jupiter. You kneel carefully, tug a tile loose, and replace it with one from your stash acquired via a trade with the local baker. 3 tiles for a promise not to report his illegal date syrup stash. Everybody wins. Fun fact: Roman Tegulae roof tiles were often stamped with the name of the manufacturer. You once found one marked property of Lucilla. She now uses it as a cheese platter. You didn't argue. As you retile, a familiar squawk breaks the silence. The pigeon is back. Your pigeon, one-eyed, scarred, smarter than most senators. He perches on the chimney stack and stares at you like you owe him money. You toss him a crust. He judges it, eats it anyway, then flies off to defecate on a senator's awning. Loyal, in his own way. Back downstairs, you tackle the laundry pulley system, a knotted mess of twine and wishful thinking. Someone's tunic has been hanging in midair for 2 days, spinning slowly like a forgotten flag. You fix the knot, untangle the weights, and whisper encouragement to the pulley like it's a warhorse. It groans, but it moves. By mid-morning, you've hammered, tied, replaced, adjusted, glued, and even muttered a minor curse to ensure one particularly stubborn shutter stops slamming. You take pride in these small victories. After all, the only thing worse than a collapsed ceiling is a door that slams open just as you're in the latrine. Quirky tidbit. Some insulae apparently had designated broom closets, but they doubled as prayer spaces for Mercury, the god of boundaries and sneaky escapes. You've started whispering to Mercury daily, not for luck, for sarcasm. He understands. Then comes the unexpected call. A broken cistern pipe? This one's tricky. The pipe runs behind the wall of Unit 4C, home of Terentius, the amateur perfumer. He's always experimenting with new romantic aromas, which usually involve vinegar, goose feathers, and lies. The last time you entered his apartment, you lost the ability to smell for a week. He greets you in a cloud of something sour and floral. "Ah, my muse returns." He beams. "Ignore the puddle. It's not all mine." You crouch behind a woven rug, chip away at the plaster, and expose the pipe. It's cracked. Of course, everything in this building eventually cracks wood, stone, relationships. You patch it with a linen strip and resin, borrowed from the carpenter downstairs. He doesn't know he lent it yet. Terentius offers you a sample of his newest scent, Rain on Marble. You politely pretend to faint. By the time you escape, it's afternoon. Your toolkit is lighter. Your knees ache, and your hand smells faintly like goat vinegar. But things are working. Nothing's collapsed today. That's a win. You drop your broom in its nook, lean against the wall, and let yourself smile. The tools of your trade may be crude, stolen, or haunted, but they work. And in this city of ambition and ashes, that's all you really need. It's rent day. Again. You knew it the moment you opened your eyes and saw a fig smashed against your door, an ancient Roman passive-aggressive reminder from your favorite tenant, Faustus of Unit 2E. The fig is his signature. Last month, it was 2 olives and a chicken feather. That was about the pipe he claimed whispered insults in the night. Today, it's rent. You sigh. Wipe fig residue off the wood and ready your wax tablet and stylus. This is the worst part of being a superintendent, not the noise, or the smells, or even the death-defying roof inspections. It's the knocking, the waiting, the awkward eye contact as someone insists they definitely paid you last week while standing next to a brand new amphora of imported wine. Rome doesn't make rent collection easy. Payments are as flexible as a bad sandal strap. Some tenants pay in coins, others in food, labor, or what they call favors, which range from foot massages to information about illegal dice games happening 2 floors down. Historians still argue whether rent was standardized across insulae. The reality, it depended on everything proximity to the forum, condition of the stairwell, whether the roof caved in during the last thunderstorm. You once overheard a tenant say rent was based on how much the building threatened your life, emotionally and structurally. The first door you knock on is answered by an old woman with one eye and no patience. She pays in garum fermented fish sauce because, as she proudly says, that's what fed the Republic. You smile politely, accept the pungent jar, and make a mental note to leave it as a gift for the next health inspector. Next stop, a young couple in Unit 3B. They're actors, dramatic ones. The man answers shirtless, draped in a toga like he's auditioning for Jupiter's understudy. We've been robbed. He declares, by time, and hunger, and envy. You hold up your wax tablet. Also, he adds sheepishly, we're short 4 denarii. You sigh and write, 3B owes 4. Again, it's not just about money. It's about power. Your power, such as it is mostly theoretical. You can complain to the landlord, but he's too busy commissioning marble statues of his dog. You can threaten eviction, but only if you're ready to drag a screaming noodle vendor down 5 flights of stairs. And you've pulled your back once this month already. You climb another set of steps, this time slower. Your feet are sore, your broom's bristles bent like a wilted laurel, and your pouch is heavier with IOUs than with actual coin. You stop at the 4th floor. The artist. No one knows his real name. He calls himself Vulcan's Brush and pays rent in murals. You've got 3 of them. A fish playing a lyre, a woman made entirely of olives, and something you think is a critique of aqueduct culture but might just be a donkey. When you asked for coin once, he wept and offered you his soul on parchment. You gave him an extension instead. You knock, no answer. Just chanting. Soft, ominous chanting. You move on. There's something oddly intimate about rent collection. You see things no one else does. A kitchen with only 2 spoons and a prayer scroll. A child painting gods on the ceiling with stolen chalk. A man crying over a broken amphora of honey. It humbles you every time. But then there are the bribes. One tenant offers you figs, real ones this time, not passive-aggressive ones. Another offers to fix your sandals. A third, Marius, the self-proclaimed garland entrepreneur, offers to write a poem in your honor if you forget about his rent for maybe a month or 2. You agree, but only because you want to hear how he rhymes insularious with glorious. You reach the top floor at midday. The stairs creak. The light slants gold and sleepy. Here, the rent is lowest, and the struggles are loudest. An old man opens his door and drops 5 copper coins into your hand without a word. His apartment is clean, neat, empty. You nod in gratitude. He nods back. Some tenants don't barter. They just survive. Quirky detail. Some scholars believe certain insulae had in-house rent boards posted in public areas, a kind of wooden shame list. You've considered carving one, but you fear the graffiti retaliation would be creative. By the time you return to your room, your wax tablet looks like a battle plan. You've collected about half the rent. The rest, excuses, food, questionable favors. You lay everything out on your table. Omnis denarii. 1 bracelet, a song lyric scribbled on a napkin, 2 jars of pickled cabbage, and the lingering scent of garlic from 2B's ongoing soup experiments. The landlord won't be pleased. But then again, he rarely is. He once frowned for an entire Saturnalia feast because someone spelled his name wrong on a wine jug. You brace yourself for another lecture about accountability from a man who hasn't set foot in the building since Nero sang publicly. You sit back, stretch your legs, and breathe. Rent day is done for now. And though your pouch is light, your shoulders are heavy with the weight of 15 floors of compromise, of diplomacy, of being the human cushion between chaos and collapse. You may not be wealthy, you may not be respected, but you're essential. And in Rome, that counts for something. You hear it before you see it. The low, yawning groan of timber under stress, a kind of ancient protest from wood that was never meant to support a bathhouse on the 3rd floor. You freeze mid-step, halfway up the stairwell, balancing a jug of vinegar and a wax tablet full of lies. The groan deepens. You hold your breath, and then nothing. Silence. You exhale. Carefully, slowly, and resume climbing. This, right here, is the part they never tell you about in those marble-etched tributes to Roman greatness. The part where ceilings bow, stairs moan, and buildings lean ever so slightly like they're trying to whisper a last goodbye before giving up entirely. The part where your entire sense of safety hinges on the hope that the cook in Unit 5B doesn't decide to fill her entire bathtub again. Because here's the thing. Insulae collapse all the time. Historians agree on that much. The rest, as always, is debated. Some say it was faulty construction. Others blame shoddy maintenance. One scroll even suggests that laughter vibrations from a particularly rowdy poet gathering led to the collapse of a building in 63 CE. You're not entirely sure that's true. But having met those poets, you're not ruling it out either. You reach the top floor and knock on a door with your broom handle, gently. Last time, the frame shifted and nearly fell on your foot. A voice inside yells, "We paid rent already." You reply, "This is about the roof." Silence. Then, it's leaking again. You inspect the ceiling beam just above the stairwell. It's cracked thin as a hair. But there, you make a note to reinforce it with rope, plaster, or divine intervention, whichever arrives first. But the real threat, the constant danger, is fire. Rome burns like a gossip scroll in a scandalous breeze. One fallen lamp, one poorly placed brazier, one ill-advised birthday sacrifice, and that's it. A whole block of buildings can go up faster than you can shout, "Fetch water." The Great Fire of 64 CE is the most infamous. Of course, Nero's name is forever etched into that smoky tale. But small fires? They happen all the time. Just last month, your friend Varinus lost his left sandal and half a tunic when a neighbor tried to roast figs poetically. He's fine. His eyebrows are not. You do your part. You keep buckets near every stairwell. You ban roof braziers. You lecture children about torch safety with the tone of an exhausted Apollo. Still, the threat never leaves. Quirky tidbit. Some insulae had fire monks, not real monks, but nervous volunteers with big jugs of water and bigger opinions about fire safety. They patrolled rooftops, sniffed for smoke, and occasionally tried to ban candles altogether. It didn't work. Romans love candles. Back on the 2nd floor, someone has placed an offering on your door handle. It's a small plate of boiled chestnuts, arranged like an apology. You take it, politely, warily. You suspect it's from the woman in 1A who flooded her entire unit last week, trying to bathe a pig indoors. The pig is gone. The damage is not. You pass by the central stairwell and pause to examine a worrying creak. You bounce slightly on the step. It wiggles. That's not ideal. You add it to your list. Reinforce 2nd stair beam before it reinvents gravity. Downstairs, an argument is boiling over between 2 neighbors. One accuses the other of cursing their door with a love spell. The other insists it was just a badly cooked fish. You intervene, wielding your broom like a staff of diplomacy. If it's cursed, sprinkle vinegar. If it's fish, eat it. They pause, grumble, disperse. You're not trained in dispute resolution. You just speak fluent exasperation. But the day doesn't end there. It never ends there. A water cistern on the roof bursts. You hear the crash, feel the splash, witness a surprised rooster sail past your window. You race up, sandals squelching. The top floor tenant, A weaver named Dama stands amidst chaos, arms outstretched like a goddess of poor plumbing. It was very full, she says, as if that clarifies the waterfall now pouring through 5 stories. You bark orders. Rope, towels, buckets, and begin the triage. You plug cracks with cloth, drain what you can, and sweep the excess down the hall. A tenant hands you a goblet of wine for morale. She says, you down it in 1 gulp. An hour later, the water's gone. The damage is contained. You smell like wet limestone and basils. And somehow, despite it all, the building still stands. But not every insula is so lucky. You remember the one 2 blocks over the one that collapsed in the middle of the night 3 winters ago? No warning, just a sound like thunder. Then dust and silence. 5 families gone. You help dig for survivors. You still dream about it. You visit that site sometimes. There's nothing left. Just scattered bricks and a fig tree now growing where the atrium used to be. Historians still debate how much responsibility fell on insulae when buildings failed. Some claim we were scapegoats. Others say we were heroes. The truth, we were just trying to keep everything upright one more day. You lean against the wall near your door, soaked to the knees, your stylus missing, your broom frayed. The moon is rising. Another collapse didn't happen today. You count that as a victory. And in this city where buildings teeter, tempers flare, and everything is flammable, including expectations surviving, another day is more than enough. You don't even knock anymore. You just lean into the doorway of Unit 4A and say, if the noodle pot's still hidden under the bed, I need to confiscate it. Again, a groan answers you. Then the slow shuffle of feet. Then the door creaks open, revealing Gellius, gray-bearded, permanently shirtless, with sauce on his chin and the spiritual energy of a man who hasn't paid rent since Tiberius took office. I don't cook, he says. You definitely cook. He shrugs and moves aside. You enter, sidestep the usual array of cracked bowls, overturned stools, and a suspicious pile of fennel stems, and crouch beside the bed. The pot is there, steaming. Again, you pull it out. Hold it up like a criminal trophy and stare at him. I need 1 week, he pleads, just until I perfect the recipe. You said that 4 recipes ago. This one's different. It sings. You're not even mad. You're just tired. You confiscate the pot, tell him he has to cook legally from now on, and make a mental note to air out the hallways. Every insula has them, the tenants from Pluto's pit, the ones you warn new residents about, the ones who seem to have been grandfathered into some ancient curse clause, the ones who somehow dodge eviction, payments, and basic logic. There's Terentia, the retired actress with 9 cats and a booming voice she insists is trained for tragedy. She once gave a performance of Antigone on the stairwell. No one asked. No one could stop her. She now uses her front door as a prop. Then there's Cassius, a former soldier who paces the hallway in full armor at 3A. No, I'm just keeping alert, he says. In case of invasion, he once tackled a visiting inspector who wore too much perfume, claimed he smelled like a Gallic infiltration. Historians still argue whether insulae had formal tenant screening processes. Some evidence suggests landlords interviewed prospective residents. Others argue anyone with a coin and no open arrest warrants could get in. One ancient letter complains of neighbors who grind barley at unholy hours and speak to pigeons as if they were senators. You might be living in the sequel. Let's not forget Minia the noodle vendor with a mysterious second oven. You've shut it down 5 times. It always returns. She insists it's for religious use. You once caught her baptizing a cabbage. She glared at you and muttered, "You wouldn't understand divine fermentation." You understood enough to fine her. But here's the truth. Even your strangest tenants are part of the building's fragile ecosystem. You may gripe about them, but without their chaos, the walls would feel too still, too lifeless. Still, that doesn't mean you don't fantasize about peace, like the time you tried to nap, and 3 children from 3C started practicing flute duets, loudly, badly. You emerged from your cupboard like a wrathful larva, holding your broom like a thunderbolt. They giggled. You cried a little, or the infamous pigeon wedding on the roof, organized by the child from 2F. You arrived just in time to stop them from releasing 18 very confused birds, wearing laurel wreaths. The child explained that Jupiter had approved the ceremony in a dream. You confiscated the guest list. It was ambitious, quirky tidbit. Some Roman households believed placing a small mosaic of Hercules near their doorway would ward off madness and thieves. You considered it, then remembered that Terentia is the madness, and Gellius is probably the thief. You drop the confiscated noodle pot into your storage nook beside the broom, and a dented amphora labeled emergency raisins. The pot hisses. You ignore it. At this point, managing tenants feels less like property upkeep and more like emotional hostage negotiation. You've learned how to diffuse arguments over stolen sandals, mitigate heartbreaks caused by swapped laundry baskets, and calm a woman who once claimed her shadow was plotting against her. To be fair, the shadow did look suspicious. There's no handbook, no safety net, just instinct, repetition, and a growing familiarity with absurdity. You walk the upper hallway again, dodging laundry ropes and half-dried bread crusts. You catch a glimpse of Sextus, the part-time philosopher who insists dreams are messages from Mercury. He once tried to charge you for interpreting a nightmare where you fell into a vat of lentils. You refused. He cursed you. You slipped in lentils 3 days later. You enter the stairwell and glance down. The drop from the 5th floor is steep, the banister rope frayed. You remind yourself to fix it. Tomorrow, or never, on the 1st floor, you find a message scratched into the wall. The gods are watching, but they're laughing. You laugh too. It's probably true. You lean against the wall. Listen. Laughter echoes. Someone argues about anchovies. A child sings off key. Somewhere, a pot falls, and you don't even flinch. You close your eyes. Your tenants are strange, loud, complicated, infuriating, but they're yours. And you wouldn't trade this building for 100 clean villas by the sea. Well, maybe one, with plumbing. Sometimes you fantasize about quitting, just walking out the front archway, tossing the broom into the Tiber, and moving to the countryside to raise cabbages and forget what ceiling mold looks like. You'd name your mule something regal. You'd never have to evict anyone named Vulcan's brush again. But then you remember the one thing that keeps you tethered to this cracked stairwell and its parade of lunatics. Revenge. Sweet, petulant, carefully engineered superintendent revenge. It's not heroic. It's not legal. It's not even particularly effective. But it's all you have when diplomacy fails and a tenant decides to store pickled onions in the communal well. You learned from the best Crispus. Your predecessor once got back at a tenant who refused to pay rent by installing a squeaky floorboard just outside his door, perfectly placed to wake him at sunrise every single day, until he paid, or snapped. He eventually moved out. You've carried on the tradition, quietly, artfully. Last month, Gellius installed an illegal brazier. Again, you accidentally posted a notice that the stairwell was being inspected for fire risk. He spent the next 2 days hiding all heat sources and sleeping in a wool sack. Problem solved. Another tenant. Fabia from 3E kept tossing her food scraps out the window. You waited until she did it again, then swept the entire mess back into her windowsill in the dead of night. She woke up to her own lentils. Poetry, really. Historians rarely mention this side of Roman life, the microdramas, the passive aggression carved into the wood grain. But dig deep enough into any preserved wall, and you'll find graffiti that's less political protest and more spiteful diary. Quirky fact. In Pompeii, one preserved wall reads, "Samius, you still owe me 3 loaves? And my knife." That's not a message. That's war. You've become a master of silent retaliation, like when someone threw a chicken bone into the cistern, you didn't confront them. You simply removed their name from the communal laundry roster. Oh, they noticed. They begged. You said nothing. Sometimes power is subtle. You've perfected the art of selective broom banging. One well-timed whack on the stairwell beam can stop a rooftop dice game without even climbing the stairs. People fear the broom. They call it Lucerna Ultima, the final lamp. You didn't coin that, but you're not correcting them either. Today, you deploy your talents once more. Vulcan's brush has painted a mural on the landing wall. It features a flaming chariot, 3 vaguely suggestive dolphins, and what you suspect is a self-portrait wearing your broom as a crown. You stare at it, long, deep. emotionally. Then, you wait for night. At midnight, you sneak out with a pot of soot, vinegar, and a bundle of rushes. You repaint the mural's dolphins to look mildly terrified. You add a mustache to the broom-crowned figure. You leave a note at the bottom that reads, "This is why Mercury weeps. Justice." The next morning, the artist is horrified. Everyone else laughs. Peace, temporarily, is restored. It's not always petty. Sometimes your revenge is strategic. When two tenants fought over a roof corner for drying figs, you accidentally assigned both their apartments to a visiting inspector. The inspector showed up. They panicked, and suddenly, they were fig friends again. Other times, you simply withhold knowledge. You know when the landlord is coming. You know who's behind on payments, who's storing illegal eels, who keeps letting their goats on the roof. And when they cross a line, you let fate take the reins. Still, it's a dangerous balance. Push too hard, and they turn on you. Whisper too little, and the chaos consumes everything. Historians still debate how much authority insulae wielded. Some claim you could evict tenants at will. Others argue you were little more than a glorified errand boy with a keyring and an ulcer. The truth: you are a puppet master with splinters. There was that one time, sweet Jupiter, you remember it clearly, when someone tried to bribe the inspector. A tenant offered the inspector fragrant dates and a back massage. You warned him. You left a note on his door. "Beware the fruit of desperation." He laughed. 2 days later, the inspector returned, furious. The dates had worms. The tenant claimed ignorance. You installed a new notice on the wall. "Bribery with fruit will not be tolerated unless delicious." It's still there, despite the battles, the nonsense. The soap operas played out on cracked tile floors. You do find satisfaction. There is a quiet thrill in knowing you've outwitted someone with nothing but a broom, a bent stylus, and an encyclopedic knowledge of who snores. You pass Terentia in the hallway. She nods. Solemn. You nod back. There is an understanding now, an armistice forged after you returned her lost cat, but charged her a cleaning fee. You stand near the central stairwell and look down all 5 stories. The ropes sway slightly. The air smells like boiled cabbage in summer heat. Somewhere, someone is playing a reed flute, badly, and you smile. Not because everything is fixed or calm, but because tonight, no one's drowned in soup, no roofs have caved in, and the mural has a mustache. That's a good day in the life of a Roman superintendent. You're patching the stairwell with a stolen amphora shard when it happens the knock. Not the clumsy fist-banging of your usual tenants. Not the annoyed thwack of a broom handle demanding attention. No, this is a polite knock. Precise, measured. It carries the heavy tone of someone with sandals too clean and too many rings. You groan. Only one type of person knocks like that. An inspector, or worse, a senator's assistant playing inspector for the afternoon. You shove the amphora piece behind a loose tile, wipe your hands in your tunic smearing soot and plaster like war paint, and walk toward the entrance. You already feel the sweat forming behind your ears. Sure enough, standing at the threshold is a man in crisp linen, arms folded, face arranged into a professionally disapproving expression. Next to him, a scribe, quill poised. Behind them, a slave holding a basket of scrolls. No one looks happy to be here. "Greetings," the man says, as if it's a threat. "We're conducting routine inspections on behalf of domus operations and urban dwellings." You don't blink. "We were inspected 3 weeks ago." He doesn't blink either. Yes, that's why it's a surprise inspection. You hate your life. Historians still argue whether Roman building inspectors had actual enforcement power or simply served as bureaucratic scarecrows. There are surviving edicts about fire safety, weight limits, maximum building heights, and proper stairwell angles, but in practice, most officials only appeared when a bribe was late or a senator's nephew tripped over a roof goat. You gesture them inside with all the warmth of a man leading wolves through his pantry. The inspector steps in and immediately cringes. "What's that smell?" You sniff. Pause. "Hope." He frowns. The scribe scribbles. You consider bribing him with fermented fish. Then, remember you used that up on the last surprise inspector. He hated it. Took your doormat in retaliation. You trail behind the team as they begin their slow, judgmental march up the stairwell. The inspector points at a cracked window, unsafe, then at a loose floor tile, trip hazard, then at a mural of Neptune eating a fig, indecent. That's public art. You counter. It has layers. He pokes it with a stylus. It has buttocks. The scribe is now visibly delighted. You lead them to the roof, where things only get worse. The tiles you mended last week have come loose again thanks to last night's impromptu roof wrestling match between two arguing lovers. You try to explain. They write it down. Quirky tidbit. One particularly colorful scroll from the 2nd century describes an insula being fined for hosting morally disruptive rooftop behavior. It's unclear what that meant. But based on your building, you have guesses. The inspector peers over the edge of the roof. A cloth line sags dangerously across the alley. Attached to your building with frayed rope and hope, a sock flaps in the wind. It looks vaguely menacing. He sighs. You know, this place is structurally ambitious. That's the nicest thing anyone said in months. He continues. There are over 15 citations I could issue right now. You nod slowly. But he shrugs. But Senator Crassus owns this building, and he doesn't like noise. So I'm going to give you until next week to fix most of it. You squint. Define most. He points at the stairs, the creak, the walls, the damp, the mural, the buttocks. You make a mental list. Sand down the stairwell. Patch the plaster. Add a toga to Neptune. As they descend, the scribe slips you a small folded note. You unfold it after they leave. It reads, I once lived in a building like this. It collapsed. Twice. You pocket the note. That's fair. The building slowly exhales after they leave. You feel it. The walls relaxing, the stairs shifting back to their usual groan instead of their I'm being judged whimper. Someone lets out a cheer 2 floors down. You don't even ask why. You sweep the entryway for appearance's sake and overhear a tenant whisper, Did they see the roof goat? Another hisses back. No, he was under the laundry. Crisis averted. You know the inspection won't matter in the long term. The senator who owns the place will delay fines, ignore structural reports, and spend the money meant for repairs on bronze statues of his father's toe. That's just how it works. Historians still debate how many Roman buildings were condemned versus how many simply fell down first. Some ancient laws claimed landlords were liable for damage caused by collapse, but enforcement was selective. You finally sit at your door, exhausted. No fines, no official censure, just a long list of suggested improvements and a vague threat that if another mural includes a naked deity eating legumes, there will be consequences. You glance at your broom. It leans patiently beside you, like a tired friend waiting for orders. You whisper, We'll get him next time. Because in the end, your job is not about perfection. It's about performance. You nod to yourself. Tomorrow, the stair will be sanded, the wall patched, Neptune's cheeks modestly veiled. And if the inspector comes again, you'll be ready. You wake up on straw that's poking you in 6 different directions and realize something absurd. You've lived here so long. The building's creaks have synced with your breathing. You exhale, and a floorboard near the 5th floor landing lets out a sympathetic sigh. You shift on your mattress, and the shutter rattles once, like it's whispering. Hang in there. You've become one with the insula. The groaning, leaking, gloriously unhinged hive you call home. You sit up, stretch, and knock your elbow against the broom. It falls. You let it stay on the floor. Today doesn't feel like a broom day. Today feels like a try not to scream into a clay jug day. The thing is, for all its misery, this job does have perks. Not many, but they're there if you squint hard enough and ignore the smell of boiled cabbage wafting from the laundry alcove. Let's start with the obvious. You live rent-free. Sort of. You pay in suffering. But you do get your own room, even if it's technically a glorified storage closet repurposed after someone abandoned a loom inside. You've got a window. Kind of. It's a rectangle cut in the wall with a linen flap. Sometimes there's air. Sometimes there's a pigeon who thinks your shelf is his reading nook. You call him Scipio. He calls you nothing. But he stares judgmentally. Still, this room is yours, unlike most tenants who share their rooms with cousins, goats, or garlic picklers. You have solitude, privacy, straw mites that respect your boundaries. Historians rarely mention insulae having separate quarters. Some speculate you lived among the tenants Others think there was a designated cubby near the stairwell. Based on your situation, it's the cubby with a strong smell of vinegar and regret. But the real perk is the front row seat to humanity's most absurd moments. You've witnessed a wedding procession rerouted through your hallway because the main street was blocked by a lost elephant. You've seen a child baptize a loaf of bread. You've seen three lovers argue on a stairwell, realize they were all dating the same poet, and then start a band together. There's a certain power in being invisible. People don't notice the superintendent until they need something, until the roof leaks, or the door jams, or someone finds a mysterious set of teeth in the bread oven again. You are everywhere and nowhere. You are Rome's background music. You pass by Unit 2B and hear laughter. A family is playing a guessing game with fruit. You smile. You head upstairs and someone's boiling wine with herbs mold. Rich, fragrant. It smells like warmth, like winter festivals, like something briefly perfect. And sometimes, just sometimes, someone thanks you, like the old woman who leaves chestnuts on your broom handle, or the child who draws little gladiators on your door, or the tenant who shouted your name when the stair collapsed and said, "Thank the gods you weren't on it." You cling to those moments like they're gold coins. Quirky detail. Some Roman buildings actually hosted informal performances in stairwells or courtyards. Your insula tried that once. It ended when two actors fought over a clay mask and someone's tunic caught fire. The audience applauded anyway. Everyone agreed it was the best comedy in months. You pause by the communal latrine, not because you need to go, but because it's where the building's news lives. Someone scrawled a poem on the wall. "My floor creaks like a ship at sea, but I'm too broke to move. You see, if it sinks, I'll float on chamber pots. Rome, sweet Rome, connects the dots." You chuckle. Poetry by plumbing. Very on brand. You step into the hallway and catch sight of something rare. A quiet corridor. No shouting. No smells. No spilled lentils. Just dust drifting through sunbeams and the soft, creaky rhythm of old wood thinking about collapsing. But not today. You feel something strange. Peace. You don't get it often, but in moments like this, standing in the middle of chaos that's chosen, for once, to pause, you feel a flicker of contentment. It's not joy. That's too ambitious. It's endurance. Satisfaction that you've held everything together one more day. Even your broom, resting against the door, seems to nod in approval. You spend the afternoon checking minor repairs, retying knots in this holy system, straightening the laundry rope, leaving a fresh bucket by the stairwell. You even scrub the stair post just for appearances, just to prove to yourself the building still deserves care. At dusk, you climb to the roof. The city is turning orange. The sun slips behind temples and shadows stretch like cats across the rooftops. Rome doesn't sparkle, it simmers. You spot Scipio, your one-eyed pigeon, nestled beside a chimney. He coos. Below you, people are preparing dinner, lighting lamps, whispering stories, living. And you keep watch, because you may be tired, you may be underpaid, you may be sleeping in a linen-scented closet next to a broom and a judgmental pigeon, but you're needed. And in Rome, that's rarer than a working stairwell. You've been hearing it for weeks now. A whisper, faint, slippery, slithering up through the drain pipes just after midnight. At first, you thought it was your imagination, or possibly fermented olive oil hallucinations. But then Terentia swore she heard it too. Something low and muttering from beneath the floor, repeating her name in a tone best described as menacing hiccup. You brushed it off. A trick of acoustics. Pipes expanding in the night. Echoes from some drunken bather 2 buildings down. Until one morning, a tenant approached you with wide eyes and a question you weren't prepared for. Did you know the latrine is breathing? You didn't. But now that she said it, you can't unhear it. You descend to the crawl space level beneath the insula, where the plumbing and foundations twist through brick like ancient intestines. You bring your broom, a torch, and a roasted fig for courage. You're not proud of the fig, but bravery comes in strange packages. The air grows damp, earthy, wrong. You pass the cistern, duck under a cracked arch, and stop near the latrine runoff pipe. You kneel. Listen, there it is, a soft sound, rhythmic, not quite words, not quite breathing, but undeniably present. You don't move. You just stare into the stone dark, wondering which god you've offended this time. Historians argue whether Romans believed their buildings could be haunted. There are records of homes being abandoned after ill omens, and whispers of cursed stones reused from old tombs. One villa was reportedly evacuated after a fountain began whispering marital advice. But your building, it has legends. People say it was built atop an old granary where a slave revolt once ended badly. Others claim a sewer priest was entombed beneath it, whatever that is. There's even a tale about a woman who vanished into her own well, only to return years later covered in moss and speaking perfect Etruscan. You don't believe most of it, but you also haven't ruled it out. Back upstairs. Your tenants are restless. Minia says her stew bubbles in weird shapes like faces. Gellius insists the shadow near his stove has started blinking. Cassius, the ex-soldier, believes the stairwell is plotting to trip him. To be fair, it might be. You try to calm them. It's an old building. You say, old things make noise. But even as the words leave your mouth, you're not so sure. You pass the laundry alcove and spot a new message scratched into the wall. Some doors are better left closed. Great, just what you need. Cryptic graffiti. You patrol the building that night. Slowly, quietly, you check the stairwell, the walls, the latrine. You leave a candle burning at the junction of the top 2 floors, part for light, part for comfort, part for whatever ghost is out there that prefers warm lighting. And just as you're about to turn in, you hear it. Again, a whisper, clearer this time. Not words, but a tone, a dragging, wet, consonant sound that rises up from the pipes like breath through gravel. You consider moving to the countryside and raising cabbages. Instead, you descend again. This time, you follow the sound down a side crawl space you've avoided for years. The one sealed with old amphora shards and a broken broom handle. Crispus once labeled "Do Not Disturb." The air is heavier here. Sticky, you squeeze past a collapsed beam and into a narrow chamber no bigger than a grain store. And then you see it. A mural. Ancient. Faded. On the wall, not a fresco, not your tenant's doing. Something older. A figure hunched over a well, arms stretched wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Behind her, staircases, winding and endless. The paint flutters. You blink. The wall is still. The whisper has stopped. You leave, slowly, carefully, quietly, back in your room. You sit on your straw mattress, light a candle, and stare at your broom like it might offer advice. It doesn't. Quirky tidbit. Roman superstitions often linked strange plumbing sounds to restless spirits. Pipes and drains were considered passageways not just for waste, but for the unknown. They even left offerings near sewer grates, just in case. You now understand that impulse. The next morning, you find a dead rat on your doorstep with a fig in its mouth. A gift. A threat, a coincidence. You sweep it into the alley and move on. Because here's the thing: your building may groan, creak, whisper, and possibly house the ghost of a pre-Republican tax collector. But it's still standing. You've patched walls, plugged leaks, faced down angry artists, drunken soldiers, and flaming pigeon ceremonies. You can handle one little spectral plumbing mystery. Probably, you post a new notice in the stairwell. If your drain speaks, kindly do not answer. No one questions it. And that night, as you drift to sleep, the building shifts around you, breathing, settling, remembering. You sleep lightly, with your broom at your side. The wind tonight carries sand. You taste it on your tongue before you even open the window. Gritty, sun-warmed dust from the western hills, drifting into Rome like a reminder that the empire stretches far past what you'll ever see. You pull back the linen flap and stare out over the city. Lamps flicker in the alleyways. Dogs bark somewhere far off. A baby cries, answered by a mother's lullaby. Rome is always awake, always shifting, and then lately, always crumbling. You can feel it in the building. Not just the rot in the beams or the swelling in the plaster. It's something deeper, like the insula itself is giving up. Or perhaps it's simply tired. You walk the stairwell with your broom tapping gently against the walls. You listen. You feel. You press your hand to the bricks as if you might take their temperature. Downstairs, the door to the latrine creaks open on its own. You close it without asking questions. Things have changed. It's not just the ghost rumors or the inspector's visit. It's the water. More precisely, the lack of it. The fountain in the square hasn't run in 2 days. The aqueduct. Your lifeline. The old artery of the city is failing. There's talk of a crack somewhere in the Aqua Claudia, miles outside the city. Bandits, earthquakes, sabotage. Historians still argue what caused the first great wave of Rome's infrastructure decline. Some point to overextension of the empire. Others blame mismanagement, local corruption, economic stress. You'd like to blame Minia's illegal soup experiments, but even you admit this is bigger than your building. What you do know is that when the water stops flowing, Rome trembles. Already, your tenants are on edge, washing less, whispering more. People are hoarding jugs. Cooking smells are sourer. You caught someone trying to break open the cistern last night. You didn't recognize them. They weren't from your building. That's what's truly unsettling. Outsiders. There was a time when the city buzzed with optimism, with fresh plaster and orderly scrolls and inspectors who meant well. Now, people pass by without looking. You've seen shutters nailed closed, doors reinforced, whole insulae gone dark. And in the market, half the stalls are empty. The fish cellar is gone. The olive cart vanished. Even the man who used to shout about exotic raisins now whispers about mold. Quirky tidbit. As Rome aged, graffiti from the later periods grew more bitter. Less romantic poetry. More scratched-out curses. One famous inscription near the Subura reads, "The aqueduct's dry. I bathed in wine. I regret nothing." You relate to that energy. You pass the landing where Vulcan's brush once painted his infamous fig chariot mural. It's faded now, flaking. The color's dull. The cheeks less offensive. It almost looks sad. The mural isn't the only thing vanishing. Cassius hasn't been seen in 2 days. Terentia says he left to rejoin his legion, but you suspect he just left, gone to the coast, or to find his son in Ostia, or to find somewhere the walls don't creak quite so loud at night. Tenants are disappearing, quietly, not all at once, but one by one. You find a sandal outside Unit 3C. The door is open. The room is empty. The walls are still warm. There's no note. You clean anyway. Pick up the straw bedding. Stack the bowls. Patch the curtain with waxed linen. You leave a broom leaning in the corner, just in case. Back on the roof, the city looks dimmer than usual. Fewer torches. More boarded windows. The streets aren't silent, but they're muted. Like the entire metropolis is holding its breath. You hear a crash behind you. Spinning. Broom raised. You find nothing. Just Scipio, the one-eyed pigeon, fluffing his feathers near the chimney. He coos once. It sounds like a warning. You sit beside him and trace a finger across the rooftop tiles. They're hot even now. Hours after sunset. Heat trapped in clay. In brick. In memory. You remember when the building was newer, or at least when it pretended to be, when the rope railing didn't sag, when laughter outnumbered complaints, when the biggest crisis was 2 lovers fighting over who got the laundry alcove during rain. Now, your list of repairs is longer than your patience. The rope's too frayed, the stairwell too warped, the cistern's half mud. And worst of all, you're running low on nails. Real nails. Not the bent ones you hammer straight again on the rooftop bricks. Not the ones you trade for gossip or leftover garum. You stare out at the skyline. Not at the temples, or the columns, or the domes, but at the roofs like yours. The insulae, stacked and groaning and tilting like drunk philosophers. They're collapsing. Slowly. Collectively, and when they fall, no marble statues will be built to remember them. No Otis, no scrolls, just broom swinging, fig collecting, nail stretching ghosts like you. Historians rarely write about the end of a neighborhood. They write about wars, emperors, laws, but not the moment a stair breaks and no one repairs it. Not the moment a window goes dark and no one knocks. You lean back, broom across your lap, and stare up at the stars. Tomorrow, you'll check the water levels again. You'll fix the broken shutter in 2D. You'll try to convince Gellius that no one needs to ferment olives on their windowsill in this weather. But tonight, you sit and breathe with the building and wonder how long it can keep holding on. You hear it in your bones before you hear it in the building. A low pop, like knuckles cracking, followed by a series of deep, hollow creaks that don't stop. They just keep echoing upward, beam to beam, floor to floor, until even the pigeons on the roof go still, and then comes the splintering. You're halfway through mopping the landing when it happens, an unmistakable crack, sharp and final, like a curse being broken or maybe spoken. You drop the mop. No time for dramatics. You run up 3 flights, past Terentia, frozen in her doorway with a pot still in her hands, past the fig mural, past Gellius, who opens his door mid-mouthful and yells, "Is this about the pickles?" You don't answer. You just run toward the groaning. The roof. Of course, it's the roof. Rome's ancient apartment blocks were never designed to last centuries, 7 stories high, with walls thinner than some tunics, weight pressing down from all sides, and every tenant with a brazier or bathtub seems determined to find the last straw. You burst through the hatch and it's worse than you thought. A corner beam, one of the big ones, has cracked straight through, shearing its load onto a section of the rooftop tiles. They're sagging, shifting. You see a pile of broken bricks, dust, a rope snapped and dangling like a dead snake, and right in the middle of it, a flamingo, a real, live, pink flamingo, flapping and squawking and completely lost. You blink. It blinks back. "I'm dreaming," you say. The flamingo disagrees and poops on a broken tile. Then you remember. The senator's flamingo. Crassus's niece had one. Claimed it brought her prophetic dreams. You'd assume that was metaphorical. Apparently not. The bird flaps again, throws off your balance, and suddenly you're sliding. You grab the edge of the hatch just in time. Tiles shatter below. The roof lets out another moan, louder this time. You scramble back, heart pounding, knees bleeding, robe torn. Historians still argue about what typically caused Roman apartment buildings to collapse. Some say fire. Others blame shoddy construction or corrupt landlords using cheaper bricks. But every insularius knows the truth. It's never just one thing. It's the pressure, the rain, the leaks, the endless repairs that don't hold, the tiled offering someone removed without permission, the extra cistern, the rope laundry line overloaded with wet tunics, the flamingo. You climb down one floor, rally the tenants. We need to evacuate. Now, most don't argue. Some stare in numb silence. Gellius grabs his noodle pot. Terentia grabs her loudest cat. Minia brings both of her ovens because, of course, she does. You guide them down, hand pressed against the wall to feel for shifting. You shout orders. You lie when needed. It's fine. Just a precaution. No, that noise is probably just the wind. Yes? I'm sure flamingos can't bring down roofs on their own. You reach the courtyard. And wait. The building doesn't fall, not immediately. But you hear the rafter groan again. You see the tilt in the upper window. The subtle sagging of a lintel that, a year ago, sat proud and square. The building is breathing hard now. You sit on a crate, sweating through your tunic, surrounded by your tenants and a very confused flamingo. Someone hands you water. Someone else asks, "Can we go back in?" You shake your head. Not yet. Quirky fact. A few ancient scrolls mention temporary insula evacuations due to angry spirits, roof warnings, or divine misalignment. You now suspect most of those were just badly patched beams and wet clay. Hours pass. The sun sets. You re-enter the building cautiously, broom in hand like a ceremonial staff. Each creak makes your skin crawl. You inspect the damage, the cracked beam, the split tile. You wedge new boards, tie new ropes, whisper soft threats to the ceiling. The flamingo follows you. You give up trying to stop it. You work through the night. By morning, the structure's still standing, wounded, but upright. The worst has passed, for now, but something inside you has shifted too. You've always known this job wouldn't last forever. The building would win eventually. Gravity always does. But now you can feel the countdown ticking. The cracks aren't just in the walls anymore. They're in you. The sleepless nights, the constant mending, the way you flinch at every groan of timber, the way the pigeon Scipio watches you like he's waiting for the roof to swallow you whole. And yet, you fix the stair rail. You patch the hole above the atrium. You repaint the inspection notice with a new date and a drawing of Neptune holding a mop. Because quitting is for senators and poets. You're the insularius. And until this building gives up completely or eats a flamingo whole, you'll keep swinging your broom. You never meant to be here this long. You told yourself this job was temporary, a stepping stone. A way to pay off that debt to the fishmonger with the lazy eye and suspicious knives. 1 year. You said 2. Maybe. Then you'd move on. That was how many winters ago now? You've stopped counting. The city has changed around you. The alleys have narrowed. The aqueduct song has grown fainter. The tenants have come and gone, some vanishing like dreams mid-sentence, others lingering like unfinished poems etched into the brick. You rise before dawn today, though sleep never really came. Too many new cracks. In the beams, in the routines, in your resolve. You make your rounds as usual, broom in hand. Though the building feels quieter, empty in places it shouldn't be, you pass 3B abandoned, 5D boarded. Someone left a sandal and a copper coin in the doorway, a parting gift or an offering. You pocket the coin, gently place the sandal on the ledge. Respect. Even the sounds have changed. The usual symphony of creaks, shouts, door slams, and pot crashes is dulled, distant, like the building is speaking in its sleep now, or forgetting its lines. In the stairwell, you run into Vulcan's brush face smudged, tunic faded. He's not painting today, just sitting with his legs dangling over the landing, staring at the wall he once turned into chaos. No one left to paint for, he says. You sit beside him for a moment. No words, just the whistle of wind through the missing tile overhead and the distant bleat of a goat somewhere it definitely shouldn't be. Later, you return to your cupboard room and open the old scroll you've kept hidden, Crispus's notes. The ones you've never read fully. Inside, diagrams, lists, a drawing of a broom with teeth, and at the bottom of one page, written in cramped Latin, "If you've gotten this far, leave, or you'll never leave." You laugh, then fold the scroll again. Too late. You walk to the roof, where the city unfurls like a cracked mosaic. The Forum, hazy in the early light. The temples, their gods asleep or indifferent. The rooftops, slouched like old men. And far off too far bright villas where no one ever asks if the stairwell moans. Scipio, your pigeon, lands beside you. He carries a piece of string in his beak. You take it. Tie it to the edge of the cracked beam like a flag. Not surrender, just acknowledgement. Historians will write about emperors, about wars and treaties and the price of grain. They'll forget you, but you know what really holds Rome together. Not senators or scribes, but people like you, broom holders, crack watchers, insula whisperers. You take one final walk through the building, past Domitia's old door, past the half-scrubbed mural, past the rope you retied a dozen times. Every step an echo, every corner a memory. You pause in the stairwell. Your hand rests on the wall, and for the first time in years, you let go. Outside, in the courtyard, the tenants you still have gather. They watch you descend, broom in hand, eyes tired but clear. Where are you going? Someone asks. You shrug. Don't know yet. You look back once, just once. The insula stands, quiet, breathing. You turn away. Because you've earned some rest. Because even buildings need to grieve. Because this time you choose to leave before the roof caves in. The courtyard fades behind you, and the weight of the broom lifts from your shoulder like the ending of a very long sentence. You step into the early light, cool against your skin, and feel the wind press gently against your back, soft, insistent, like the city saying goodbye, or thank you, or both. The noise of the insula recedes with every step. The floorboard creaks vanish, the whispers fade. The breath of old wood, old walls, old ghosts softens into silence, and in that silence, a strange warmth settles into your chest. Not peace exactly, but something close. A loosening, a letting go. You don't know where the road leads. Maybe to another block with another broom. Maybe to a quiet garden where stairs never collapse and flamingos don't appear out of nowhere. Maybe nowhere at all. But you walk anyway, because tonight, your hands are empty. The rope is not frayed. The roof, for once, does not need you. You breathe. The stars blink awake above you, gentle and indifferent. Rome exhales. And finally, so do you.